Okay, so let's start by putting some of this information in. So, FOB is fuel on board, and we can see it's 20.08 because it's burned a bit from the APU, so let's just call it 20. It's fairly safe. Zero fuel weight was 102.2, if I remember rightly. Now you can see it's populated the takeoff weight, and it's automatically calculating the landing weight, and it's calculating all the other speeds here. So our center of gravity is 29.7. Why do we have to type our center of gravity in, you might ask? Well, the A310 is fitted with a pretty complicated center of gravity control computer, is what it's called. Now what it will do is it will actually pump fuel from the center tanks to the trim tank in flight, and will bring the center of gravity aft to reduce fuel burn. And in the sim it will actually do that. It's actually physically affecting your center of gravity, and you can see it pumping the fuel backwards and it will pump it forwards. But it needs to know what the center of gravity is in the beginning, otherwise it doesn't know where to start or what to aim for. So that's why you must type that in now. So now we can move on to takeoff approach. So this is our performance page. So we want to put in the figures that we calculated. 144, 146, and I'm going to be stupid on purpose, even though I've done this before, and go, oh, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, it says brackets FCU because you need to put it in on the flight control unit. So let's do that now. So this is our V2 speed, which is set, and we come back down again now. So let's talk about a few more things on this page. If we want to adjust the thrust reduction and acceleration altitude, we can. So we can type those in here, just like the A320, and it will automatically reduce the thrust and accelerate when we type that in. So if you want to do an NADP 1/2 type departure, this is where you do it. This is saying our F speed, S speed, green dot speed. So fairly similar to what you would expect. And we can also check out the approach. So this is what it's expecting the approach to be. So we can put the minima in and all that sort of stuff on the ground, if we so wish, but we don't have to do that. Okay, going back to our diff script, what do we have left? We've done the init now, so then we go back onto the progress page. Everything else here is done. We can put a bearing distance back to the runway, so we can go LEIB, and we can do 0.6. So it shows us 1 mile away, if that makes sense. And that is it. That's the whole thing programmed. Now obviously you can check these departures against your charts, and we can check that it all makes sense. So we can see we're going to 360, there's our Mach number, there's the arrival, all the different constraints in there, 250 knots, coming onto the approach. But that's up to you to check that, okay? Final thing we need to do is enter the flex temperature, because you might be saying, well, you haven't typed the flex temperature into the FMS. No, I have not, and that's because it's a different system, so let's look at it now. Here we have the thrust rating panel. The thrust rating panel is very similar to what you'll see on a 757 or a 767, but it's the only Airbus in the world ever fitted with one like this, the A300 A310 family. So we calculated our flex temperature as 59 degrees Celsius. See, flex TO temperature degrees Celsius. So we click the flex TO button, and then we scroll this until we see +59. So it then shows us what we expect our N1 figure to be for takeoff, and also you can see it draws it here. So if you can see me when I move this, it actually moves the limit up there. So if we go toga, that's where we expect toga to be, MCT, climb, cruise, flex. That's how it works. So we just select flex, select the temperature, good to go, and this shows our actual outside calculated total air temperature. That's it. We are basically done with the FMS. We just need to review. We've done everything, thrust reductions in there, V1, everything's all good to go. Okay, some final things we need to do. So we come back up here. We need to set our first stop altitude, which is 3,000 feet. Only way to get that is from the charts. It depends. ATC may also assign you one. And what we also need to do is set preset. So we right click, and then, sorry, we left click and then right click. So we get the little preset light, and we want to set 250 knots in here. I wouldn't worry too much about this system for now. If you don't bother doing this, it's not going to be the end of the world. Okay, it's just this is what you should do, so we're going to be good and we're going to do it properly. So preset is there, and we're not going to go too much into that system. Next, we're going to arm profile and arm nav. We can see it says peak climb. Nav is in blue. There are armed modes. So the reason we do this is now after takeoff, automatically nav will automatically engage at 30 feet. Peak climb will automatically engage at the thrust reduction altitude. So you won't need to do anything. And you can arm them here on stand, shut down. That's how you do it. So you set everything up, and then we taxi out, and when we take off, all of these engage. So it's a big thing. Make sure profile and nav are armed now. If you get yourself into a mess, simply turn off both flight directors, and you'll see it blanks, and we turn flight directors back on, and then we have alt heading VS back as before. So now we need to press profile and nav. So if you get yourself into a mess, think, oh, I don't know what modes I need to be in, turn both flight directors off, wait a few seconds, turn them back on, profile and nav again, you're going to be good to go. Okay, so that's that sorted. Okay, so we're nearly ready to do our first checklist, and we're nearly ready to push from stand. There's just a few final things we've got to do, and we're going to go back to the overhead to do them now. Alrighty, now we need to turn these white lights off, so we're going to turn all of the fuel pumps to normal, so turn them on, and we're also going to turn these all on now. The reason this is delayed until the late stages is because you put wear on the fuel pumps running them when they're not needed, and you also heat the windows and heat the probes on the outside when it's not needed as well. It wastes power, it wastes wear on the items, so that's why it's left to this late stage and not part of the normal setup flow. So now we can do the checklist. So we access the checklist by pressing this one here, and we can see this is the normal checklist for the A310. So we're going to do the before start checklist down to the line. So this is the line here. Cockpit preparation was completed. Signs on and auto. We can now put the seatbelt signs on, remember, because refueling has been complete. So on and auto. Fuel quantity, we had 20,100 kilos balanced. Navigation was checked and set. Landing elevation, 50 feet. Altimeters, we had 1013 set on both. Brake and anti-skid, normal on. Before start checklist, down to the line. So that's it, completed. So next what we need to do now is we need to get our pushback clearance. So we would talk to ATC or get it from the in-sim menu. Remember, we're not going to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to push back, come to a stop, and then start both engines. So normally you would do it during the push, but it's a bit too busy when you're trying to teach someone how to do it, single pilot, etc, etc. But we are going to push away from stand now. So let's get our pushback clearance. We would imagine that we've got that, and we have a few items to do when we've got that. First of all, we need to make sure that the windows and doors are closed, which makes sense that they are closed. Then we want to make sure that the cockpit door is closed. We can simply look at the overhead, remember, to see there's no light there. Then we can put the beacon light to on. This shows the ground crew that we're going to start the engine. Parking brake, I'm going to leave it as on because we haven't called the tug yet. So let's call the tug. Ground options. We can prepare the aircraft for pushback and departure, and then we click this. So now we know a tug is going to come and connect up to us, and I'm going to release parking brake. And once he's connected, they should start pushing us backwards. So now we can do the before start checklist below the line. Windows and doors closed, beacon is on, and parking brake would be on, but we've got the tug coming. So the before start checklist is completed. The next one we're expecting to do is the after start checklist. Alright, so we're pushing now, and I'm going to leave this menu open. Once we get to the end of the push, I'm just going to click stop, set the parking brake, and then they'll completely disconnect and go away. Okay, that will do. We'll come to the end of the pushback now. We're coming to the stop. Look at the left side of the window. We are completely stationary. Park and brake to on. Okay, so now we're going to do the engine start procedure. So, engine start. Throttle levers, we make sure they're idle. Ignition, make sure that it's in A or B. Now, commonly it's used as A for odd days and B for even days, just so people use the different starters, not so one just gets worn out, but just use A today. Make sure we get both arm lights, we do. Engine 2 is normally started first, so we're going to do that. So what happens is you call out start engine 2. Then you press the start engine 2 button, which is this one here. We should get the blue light, which we do. We call out valve open. Then we call out N2, because we can see the rotation. And then we call out oil pressure, as we can see the oil pressure. If we don't get any of those things, it's not going to be a good start. Now we're above 20%. Put the fuel in. We call fuel on. We then say fuel flow when we see the fuel flow. And now we wait. The next thing we're expecting to do is at 45% N2, we call 45%, and that's it. It's quite a bit more involved than, say, the A320 because it's not fully auto start. So we say 45%, we can see we hear that noise at 45%, that's when the starter is expected to disengage. So the next engine start I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm just going to do it as you would, okay? So it seems more professional, or slightly more professional, let's say that way. So, start engine 1. Valve open. N2. Oil pressure. Fuel on. Fuel flow. %. And that's it, right? So now we wait for the engine to start. And once the engine's started, we should have said this for the first engine, but what you should say is all parameters correct. That's it. So are all the parameters correct? Let's take a look. Looking good. We're looking for generally 2, so 20% M1, 4, 400 degrees, 6, 60% M1, probably around 600 on the fuel flow. So it looks normal. It looks normal. This is all green and it looks good to go. The one thing that you can do with the A310 that you can't do with, say, the A320 is if you put the fuel in straight away. So you click the open light, put the fuel in, you can hot start the engine. So you will see this indication go way high and you'll get a warning that you've hot started the engine. So it's something to be aware of. That is actually simulated. Okay, so now we have both engines started. We need to do our after start flow. That is triggered by me moving the ignition knob to off. So I'm going to move this to off, and now it triggers the flow. So we turn the APU bleed off, we turn the APU off, we set any engine anti-ice that we need to, we set the flaps that we need to. Remember, we're setting 15-15. Then I arm the spoiler, and then I reset the rudder trim, and then I set the pitch trim as required. Now remember, pitch trim for us today was 0, but if it was 1 up, we would do this. If it was 1 down, we would do that. But we're going to be setting 0 in the middle, so that's the best way to do it. And that is the after start flow completed. Now we would do the after start checklist. So let's do that now. So after start checklist, pitch trim 0 degree set, rudder trim 0, spoilers armed, slats of flaps 15 set, Ecam status checked. How do we know it's checked? We would have the purple status message on the screen if there was something wrong with it, which there isn't. Anti-ice is off, hand signal received. What does this mean? Well, in real life, when they push you back, they show you the pin to show you that they've got the pin for the pushback, but when we click stop pushback, that was assuming they've gone away and done everything properly. After start checklist completed. Next one is going to be the before takeoff checklist down to the line. So now we need to taxi out. So first of all, we're going to set this to taxi, and then we are going to move the aircraft. Now, taxiing the A310, kind of interesting. So let's talk about it. So let's release the parking brake. So if we look at the left side, can you see we're rolling very, very slowly? Now we can do very tight turns like this, even at idle, which is realistic actually, and it's very cool we've been able to capture that in FS2020. Now, if you're heavy, so today we're 121 tons, which is it's pretty heavy, but you can kind of see, look, now we're not rolling anymore, we've kind of come to a complete stop, because we do need a bit of thrust to get us moving. If we're very light, we don't need that at all. When we're below about 100 tons, it will roll and turn. So we need what is called breakaway thrust. So we're going to put a little bit of thrust on, and you can see we start to move. We haven't got a lot of thrust on here, and now we start to turn. So we're going down this one here, but you can see the tillers are animated and moving, and now I can come back to idle. We should roll. Pretty accurate taxiing characteristics, to be honest, in terms of thrust. Just going to give it a tiny bit more thrust. We want to make sure that we're no more than 15 knots in these turns and 30 knots in a straight line. How do we know? So we can see our ground speed down here is shown in knots. So we're at 6 knots, 7 knots now. Going to come to idle for this turn. Brakes, we need to make sure that they're checked. So how do we do that? Well, we just push on the brakes, and can you see there's a bit of a violent brake check, but we're looking to see that this doesn't move. Why is that? Remember when we did the alternate brakes check before? We saw that the pressure came up on them. That's just to double, triple check that we didn't accidentally leave it in alternate on, or there's been some swap to the alternate braking system on its own. So that's what that check is there for. So now what we need to do is we need to do the flight control check. So we need to actually manually select the flight control page. So this comes up here. And now we can do the flight control check. So we announce flight control check, and I say full up, full down, neutral, full right, full left, neutral. And now I would do rudder check, but my rudders are attached to the nose wheel steering, so I'd have to go in and change some settings. But well, we can quickly go like this, you see, and we can see that the rudder's working. Actually, you can see the nose wheel skidding there. So that is the flight control check completed. So what we check now is we make sure that the flight directors are set to on, which they definitely are. FMA, remember, P climb, nav blue. So we've got that, and that's done. Now the weather radar we can turn on, so that's down here. Make sure that goes across to system number 1, and we make sure that it's in turbulence, which is fine. Trying to do everything in one go is a little tricky. Taxiing, tutorialing, explaining, all this sort of stuff. So next thing we're going to do is the takeoff config test. So how do we do that? So we press this button here, and you see it says takeoff test normal on this screen here. So that checks everything. That checks the flaps, the slats, the blah, 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 and it will give us a warning if something is not in the expected position. Now we do the before takeoff checklist down to the line. So, flight controls checked, briefing was confirmed, slats and flaps 15-15 set, performance FMAs, so we read it, so we say peak climb blue, nav blue, 1FD2, or 1FD1, sorry, that's a bit of a lapse. Then we say takeoff configuration checked, transponder We're not using it today, but we would be turned it on, but that's where we would check it. Before takeoff checklist, down to the line. Okay, so you can see we're at 18, 19 knots now. I'm still idle, so it's nicely rolling. So we're going to slow down slightly a bit more, because we're bigger than a max span of 36, so we definitely don't take that last one. Okay, parking brake's going to come on. So we do the before takeoff now. So this is where we'd be waiting to see basically being cleared to line up with the runway. So let's imagine we were clear to line up the runway, because I definitely can't do all this in one go. We're going to do it here, but we would be doing it as we're coming onto the runway. So we would check to see if the approach is clear. I don't see anything. Approach seems to be clear. Brake temperatures, we can deselect the flight control page. Brake temperatures look good. If the brake fan was on, we would turn it off. And this is where we set all the brakes max. Odd, right? Not the same as on the A320. That's why the takeoff test didn't give us any warning, because you set it now. Ignition, we set this to continuous relight. Pack valves, we're going to leave them on. And now we're going to turn on this whole system. So we put it to TARA, and we can leave it in the neutral position. Everything else looks good. Lights, we're going to put these on. These are going to come on as well. And this comes to takeoff, strobes come on. So strobe light to on, nose light to takeoff, landing lights to on, turn offs to on, this to system 1, and it's personal preference. You can leave it on if you want to, but you don't have to. So now we'll do the before takeoff checklist below the line. Cabin, secure, TCAS, TARA, packs are on, ignition is in continuous relight, anti-ice off. Before takeoff checklist completed. Next one is going to be the after takeoff climb. So let's line up with the runway. Okay. While we're lining up with the runway, we're going to talk about what we do for takeoff. So what we do for takeoff is we first of all line up the runway, obviously. Then we're going to come stop on the brakes, and we're going to set 50% N1. Once we're stabilised, we're going to be pushing half stick, so half the control column forward. Then we're going to press the go levers. The go levers are actually located inside here, but we have this easy to press button here. The reason that we want to say for you to use this is trying to click inside something else. It's very, very awkward, but this will do the same thing. Then we read the FMAs that we see, the FMA changes, and above 80 knots, we slowly start to release the pressure on the stick. So we slowly release the pressure till it becomes neutral. By 100 knots, we announce 100 knots, and then we're looking for our V1 and our rotation speed, which is drawn on here and also shown as the white marker there. Slow rotation, so 3 degrees per second up to flight directors, and we can then put the autopilot in pretty quickly because I've got too much to do. And positive climb, gear up, and then we'll do a flow after that, which we'll talk about in the end. So, are you ready? I'm ready. Let us go. So, 50%. That'll do. Thrust, SRS, heading, checked. Thrust set. So above 80 knots, slowly starting to release back pressure to be neutral by 100 knots. 100 knots. V1, rotate. Positive climb, gear up. Gear up, follow the flight directors. AP1. So once the gear's gone up, we actually do our flow straight away. So what we do is we disarm the spoilers, we turn the runway turn off lights off, and we also turn this to off. So that's what we do as soon as the gear goes up, okay? Okay, P thrust, P climb. We just had the change. We've reached the thrust reduction altitude, and climb thrust has become available. Well, it's automatically set itself. Now, we wait till we're 20 knots above F. So we are 20 knots above our F speed now. So now we call for flaps 15-0, 15-0. And then when we're above S speed, our slat speed, we call for flaps 0. Speed check, flaps 0. Now we're approaching our 3,000 feet. I'm going to let it level off because I want you to see what it does when you don't do anything. So it will just go into P speed, P climb, and it will continue to accelerate. And there we go, it's leveling itself off. So now what I'm going to do is wind the altitude up. You see how it's reverted. We had the triple click. That means, oh, I don't know what you want me to do. So it's just gone into vertical speed and speed. So now we're going to go all the way up to our final altitude, which is 36,000. And I'm going to put it back into profile. So now we have P thrust, P climb. And it's pitching back up. So that looks good. So now we do the climb flow. So seatbelt signs, for the cabin crew you could release them now, but we don't have any today. Runway turn-off lights, we've already put those to off, so that's good. This continuous relight goes to off. The EFIS control panel looks good as well. And then what we make sure we do as well, gear to neutral. So that is the after takeoff flow done. So now let's take a look. So after takeoff / climb checklist. Slats and flaps retracted. They are gear up and neutral. It is packs on. Remember, if we did a packs off takeoff, you'd put them back on at thrust reduction. So they're on, which is the same as the 320. Altimeters are both set. So we're going to leave at 1013, but just for completeness, we can set standard now because the standard is 1013, so up to you. Now, notice how it's holding the 250 knots. It's holding it for two reasons. First of all, because there's a speed constraint here, and also because we're below flight level 100. It's smart enough to know that. And yeah, that's it really. Now we're on our way. You can see pretty involved. Got a lot to do, but it's not too bad. Like, it still can get quite busy. And we're leaving the landing lights on until we get to flight level 100. You can turn them off earlier. It's personal preference. Mostly it's an operator thing because it creates a fair bit of drag on the A310 because they're external. So it's up to you. So we're going to wait till we get to flight level 100 before we do that. Okay, flight level 100, boom, speed is increased, so now we can put these to retract. And one final thing we do need to check, progress page. So, does our cruise level, max and optimum make sense? Well, we're going up to flight level 360, our optimum is 360, and our max level is 373. Makes sense to me, that makes sense. And we're accelerating away, so that's excellent. So, that's it completed. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about how to use the navigation system. So we can see we're going to Lampa, however you say that. We're going to this waypoint, and let's say we want to go direct to a waypoint past it. We want to skip one of the waypoints. How do we go direct to? Okay, so the next one is going to be K-Bear. So what's past that? So if we click the direct to key, it gives us a list of waypoints. So L-Tan is obviously past here, so let's check that. Zoom out. There you go, I can see L-Tan, and then I can see MHN and Miros. So I'm actually going to go direct to Miros, because it's a fair bit of a shortcut. So let's find it. Here's Miros now. So I select Miros, so it says direct to, so then you must click insert from the other side. Boom. You see that? So now our direct to is Miros. It draws the line to it, and it will actually draw a little arc to show where it's flying to. So that's how you go direct to the flight plan in the A310.